Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talk Tech with Ted, Kathy, and the U. Today, we are talking hybrid teaching ideas, and some of these ideas are going to be a review of what we've shared with you in the fall, and then we have some new ideas to share with you as well. So hopefully these strategies look familiar to you because we've covered this information with teachers in the fall. Our first strategy is called the simultaneous strategy. This is where the teacher is teaching both groups at the same time, and the teacher is using Google Meet for the remote students only. The pros of this, of course, both groups of students get the same lesson, and you can have real-time interaction with both groups, the in-person and the remote, to gauge their understanding. The cons of this, of course, there's no interaction happening between the remote and the hybrid students. Our next strategy is the co-teacher strategy. So this works well if you have an aide, a co-teacher, a grade level partner, where one of them can co-teach and work with the remote students or the in-person students, or vice versa. So the pros is that both of your groups are getting undivided attention from an instructor. The cons, you could have teachers that have two different teaching styles. So Ted and I could do this strategy, but we may have completely different teaching styles. And so that may slightly vary how that material is presented to the students.
One of the really cool thing about these hybrid teaching strategies is that you don't have to just pick one. You can go through all of these and you may use all four. You may only use one. You may go between one or two. So the main thing is that we're trying to give you a groundwork or a framework to think off of with. So you're going to try and determine what works best inside of your class, like we talked about before. But we're going to go really heavy into the grouping strategy, which is going to be pretty exciting, I think, because it does open up a unique amount of possibilities there.
Absolutely. The next strategy here is the remote face-to-face strategy. So this is essentially what teachers are doing now with remote teaching, where everyone, regardless of their environment, is on their computer on the Google Meet. The pros of this, you can have that interaction between your remote and your hybrid students. And implementation-wise, this would be fairly easy because, again, it's very similar to what teachers are doing now in a remote setting. The cons of this strategy would be that the teacher is managing the virtual students and then also the in-person students. So if an issue does pop up within one of those groups, the other group may not be getting the teacher's full attention. And then finally, we have the grouping strategy, which Ted said we're going to really dive into here. But the grouping strategy is simply teaching one group first and then the other group separately. So undivided attention to the remote or the in-person group, and then you're able to provide that support to those students as it is needed. The cons with this, it's timely to implement because, of course, while you're teaching one group, the other group has to be working on some sort of activity or viewing an instructional video, so there's prep time to make all of that happen. And of course, we know students can easily get off task if there isn't an adult, directly engaged during that instruction.
And the really cool thing about grouping is that it just seems like there's hundreds of ways to implement it, and there is no one right way to do it for that either. This image, we kind of pulled it out because it provides all of these different almost blended learning models that we can apply to some of the lessons that we may teach our students. So we gave you all of those formats for your class. That's all awesome and fine and dandy, but now we want to try and provide you with real life examples that you can actually apply to your class when hybrids start. So this page is going to go through different models, and what we're going to do is actually provide teaching ideas based off of these models in your classroom. So Kathy, you want to talk a little bit more about blended? Because I know we've mentioned it, but I hope people understand it by now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just dive into this this first idea here. And what I like about these models or these ideas that we came up with is they really break down the lesson structure from start to end. And I think that's really important for our teachers going into hybrid, is that they have at least an example to help build their lessons off of. So that's what we really liked about these models or ideas that we pulled from this site. So with this first idea in your warm-up, both your students that are at home and in person have some sort of warm-up activity that's posted in Google Classroom. It could be a Google form, it could be a question that you post in your Google Classroom, but then everyone's working on that. And they also suggest having a timer displayed so that your students know their time limit of when they need to be done. And then this is a great time for the teacher to take attendance and address any of those housekeeping items that we take care of at the beginning of class. For direct instruction, the students at home would watch a pre-recorded video, and then they would be on mute while this is happening, but they're still present on that video conference on Google Meet. And then the students that are in person, you've got two options here. So you could play that on your smartboard for your in-person students, or if your students that are in person have headphones, they can watch the video independently as well.
Then so Kathy, if they had to make a video, what would you suggest is probably the easiest way for them to create that, whatever that first video lesson that they're going to push out?
I would do exactly what we're doing now, Ted, which we are in a Google Meet, and the record button to record our Google Meet. Ted's probably laughing right now because we're on our third take of this, and fingers crossed.
Right, we're going to keep going.
Final take here. But this is what Ted and I use for recording our videos because it's simple. We use Google Meet all the time, and we haven't had any issues with recording for both of us. So that's an important thing to note. If you teach with a co-teacher and you were going to record your lesson together ahead of time, I would definitely recommend Google Meet. Ted and I did one the other day using Screencastify, and I made the mistake of not hitting the correct setting, and so none of Ted's audio was recorded. So when we did the re-record, we just decided we're going to stick with Google Meet.
Yeah, and it's the other benefit is it goes directly to Google Drive, and you can edit that video even if you want to in certain sites, or just simply publish it directly to Classroom. So it does make sharing pretty easy.
Moving on here with this idea, next is guided practice. So you can have the students meet together as an entire class, and then this is where they get to ask questions based on that video that provided the instructions. And so there's multiple ways that you can do this. They can submit them through a Google form, and the teacher can have that form pulled up and view those responses live in order to respond to those questions. Pear Deck is another great option because you have that interactive piece. So you could have a question slide through Pear Deck and the students can submit their questions there. Or you could also just use the chat in the Google Meet. And that way you're addressing any questions that students may have had after watching that instructional video. Next would be the independent practice portion of the lesson. So students could work in small groups. So you could have your students in class in groups, but then you can use breakout rooms to put your remote students in groups. You could also just have students working independently during this time. Of course, it's not necessary to have students work together in groups because that can be tricky sometimes. And then finally, you have your closure activity. So, Google Forms are a great exit activity. Just quick couple of questions to have the students complete at the end of the lesson to gauge their understanding. All right. So our next idea here, and you're going to notice there's some common themes happening throughout these different grouping strategies, which is good to know because you can customize this to make it work for your class. So again, here with the warm-up, we see the students logging into Google Classroom, starting with a discussion question or some sort of Google form, having all of your instructions there. And then moving into the direct instruction piece, your remote students could watch a recorded video, and then you could be teaching live to the students that are in person. Moving on to the guided practice portion of the lesson, it might vary. So you might do guided practice work with your in-person students while the remote students are in a small group or even working independently. And then the next day, you flip-flop that. And so this is great because both groups will be getting the same amount of time of direct instruction with the teacher, but then they're also getting that teacher's individual attention using this this strategy here. So that's pretty powerful. And then finally, at the independent practice, if the students can go into groups. So again, you can have those in-person students in groups, and then using breakout rooms if you wanted to for your remote students. Or of course, there's always the option to have students work independently during this time. And this might be a good place where if they're going to work independently, where you put everyone in their own breakout room, even if they're in person in front of you. But this way, for those remote students, you can go in and check in on those remote students individually during that independent practice time.
Now, keep in mind, the whole point of grouping and setting up your lessons in this manner is that trying to teach both groups at the same time and supporting both of them at the same time can be difficult because you have to try and communicate either virtually or face-to-face with your kids. So, I mean, we've always heard about differentiation and small grouping, and this actually, a hybrid teaching environment actually lends itself to always going in that grouping direction, because I can then provide actual instruction time and answer any questions for those students directly, rather than having that whole group aspect to it. So again, you're going to go through all of these ideas. Most of these are going to be centered around some kind of video that the teacher creates while one group does the face-to-face or one group does the video. So
absolutely. Sometimes the in-person activity isn't just going to connect with what the students at home are able to do. So science labs are a perfect example of this, where if they don't have the materials at home, it would be difficult for them to do it. So in these moments, independent projects can be very helpful to help them learn the same things, but doing it in a different manner. And this kind of ties us back to what we sent out this Tuesday regarding hyperdocs. So hyperdocs are fantastic for facilitating independent projects. And I just went ahead and linked our presentation that we shared on Tuesday, and then also the video that we did, just to give you a refresher. But again, hyperdocs are going to house all of your lesson materials and resources and assessments all in one place. And there's also the ability to add in that student choice. So you offer multiple ways for students to demonstrate their learning, and it really puts the students in the driver's seat, allowing them to choose which method they want to use to demonstrate their learning.
So as you were talking about idea number 4 here, so where it's involving like a specific lab or maker project, instantly my head went to Genius Hour or passion projects. So even if you set up your classroom in this blended environment where one group is working on that direct instruction, that lesson that you're trying to focus on, you can have the other group working on a completely separate project that may not even be related to the lesson of that day. The whole point is that you want to be able to provide very good concrete instruction to a smaller group of kids so that you can be effective, and then have the other group working on something obviously related would be better, but something so that you can have that opportunity. So I think passion projects would be an awesome thing to involve here. And we've never, every time I've always brought it up, it's always been there's no place to put it in. I feel like we finally have a place to put it in now.
All right, so just some additional ideas here. And we talked about this on one of the previous slides for recording your lessons ahead of time. So again, it's definitely front end work in order to do this, but it allows more flexibility on the teacher's end. And also this is a great opportunity if you have a grade level partner for the 2 or the 3 of you, however many grade level partners you have, to kind of divide and conquer the work. So you could have one person take on one subject and pre-record a lesson, and then you share that content with each other. And again, Screencastify is an option, Google Meet's an option. Ted and I have kind of leaned towards using Google Meet, but those are 2 options that you have for pre-recording those lessons. And then Pear Deck is another great tool to use during hybrid. because you can use it for the remote students and then also have it up on the smartboard for your in-person students. And there's that wonderful option for interaction. So students can respond to questions that you ask them. And that's also a good channel for them to ask questions to you to make sure that you're addressing questions from both groups of students. And when you're done with your session, you can go back to peardeck.com and log in, and you'll be able to view any data. So any responses that students gave will be visible there.
Which is an awesome formative assessment tool. So, I mean, you can actually put in entire question and answer sections for that and have that data right away from both groups at the same time. So Pear Deck is a really useful tool here.
And you can do multiple choice in there too. That was one feature I used quite a bit. And I would sometimes even take that for a grade. I would tell the students, hey, these questions at the end are going to count for a grade. But it's quick, it's easy. It can get downloaded into a spreadsheet when you're done. So it's a really quick and easy tool for teachers.
Right.
And then here we just have a sample structure of a hybrid lesson. And I liked this because when I was just thinking about hybrid, I know for me, I was a middle school teacher. So, our schedules are very structured based on the class period length. So I thought this was just very helpful in breaking down the time chunks throughout a lesson, and then also what each particular group is doing throughout that lesson. And of course, the chunks of time could vary based on what grade you teach. For our younger grades, those chunks may be smaller. What was it, Ted? The 10-to-2 ratio that we learned about in a lot of the conferences that we attended?
Yep. It was even less for younger kids. I mean, like the younger you go, the less time you have for, what was it? Like how much time the student can focus on a lesson at a given time. So it's like for 7 minutes, the kid's engaged, and then you need to take a break.
Yeah. And that break might just be that they're talking with their peers about what they're learning, but they just really stress the importance of giving them that time to process rather than just powering through the lesson and hoping that they're comprehending all of that material.
And if you look at this example of a hybrid lesson, it is a grouping structured lesson too. So you look at students in class at home, continue to work on activity, and then the teacher does small group check-in with those online students. So you may be flip-flopping and going back and forth in real time during your lessons, but again, it all depends on what your lesson is for the day and how you're going to teach it and who's with you. I think that's the big one, is who's with you.
Absolutely. And then here at the end, we have some resources. This may look like a lot, but this is where we got a lot of our material for, and so we wanted to make sure that we acknowledged that and we shared that with you as well. And down at the very bottom here, I just want to point out, I included the link for the doc that Ted and I made a couple of months ago with Google Meet tips and tricks. Because even as we've gone through teaching remotely, we still get some frequently asked questions about Google Meet. So we wanted to make sure we included that resource for you.
The one thing that I want to add is that our next presentation is actually going to be an exciting one, right, Kathy? We're going to be
super excited about it.
I am. I mean, it's going to be, we're going to do a real live recording of classroom tech setup. So we're going to actually go into a classroom, show you how to get your headphones going, how to get your webcam set up, and then actually give you probably some examples of how you can arrange your room to effectively teach when we go into hybrid. So we're going to make it as interesting and as cool as we can, and hopefully give you some good ideas once this happens.
Are we going to wear matching outfits?
Our OTL shirts. We can wear our OTL shirts.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for watching another episode of Talk Tech with Ted, Kathy, and the U. As always, we are here to support you if you have any questions, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And we will see you guys again very soon with some more tech tips.
See ya.